Welcome to the DOGE Diaries, diving deep into government efficiency.
Okay, so, wow, what a week, right? I mean, it's like things are moving at warp speed. The whole doji concept. It's not just some theoretical idea anymore. It's like a real-world experiment, a live test of how to make government function better. You've got the executive orders, this whole federal funding pause thing. Well, it's something.
Warp speed is one way to put it, I guess. More like a roller coaster to me, and I'm not sure I like the ride. All this talk of efficiency, and I see as a lot of chaos. These firings at the DOJ, the pause on all federal grants. I don't know, it feels like they're just pulling the rug out from under everyone. I'm just trying to make sense of what it all means.
Chaos is definitely the word, Otto. And honestly, experiment is way too kind. This is a wholesale disruption of established processes, and it's frankly terrifying. You just can't run a complex government like this, you know? The DOJ firings alone, completely undermining the rule of law, all in the name of, what? Presidential priorities. That's not how a stable democracy functions.
But Sarah, isn't some level of disruption necessary to break free from the old, inefficient ways? It's like, you can't build a new house without demolishing the old one first, right? This pause, these firings, they're all part of this larger restructuring, this necessary reset. I mean, maybe we need to be willing to accept short-term discomfort for long-term gains. Think of it as a system upgrade. It might have some glitches at the start, but eventually, it'll run much more smoothly, more efficiently. And that's the goal, isn't it?
Yeah, but Jesus, what about the people in the meantime? Like, you're talking about glitches, but these glitches affect people's actual lives. The grants for after-school programs, community centers. I read about how the funding is now frozen. What about those small business owners who are relying on those federal loans? It's not just numbers on a spreadsheet, you know. These are real people facing real consequences. I'm not seeing any long-term gains when the immediate impact is so painful for so many.
Exactly, Otto. And it's not just about the immediate impact, it's the precedent this sets. It completely undermines the separation of powers, doesn't it? Congress allocates funds based on specific needs, based on laws and processes. The president can't just say, oh, I don't like where that money is going, I'm going to just pause it all. That's not how our system works. And firing these career DOJ officials because they investigated him, that's pure retaliation, a chilling effect on anyone who dares to hold those in power accountable.
But maybe that's the point, Sarah. Maybe that's exactly what needs to happen. The old ways, the old systems, they haven't been holding people accountable, have they? There's been so much inefficiency and waste, with agencies bloated, programs that don't really work. It's like a clogged pipe and you need a complete overhaul. And, I mean, isn't a temporary pause for review a valid approach? Like if a company is inefficient, they reorganize. So why not the government too? And aren't some of these changes necessary for things to improve? It's like the memo said, it's to align with the will of the American people.
Align with the will of the people. I'm not sure all of the people wanted this kind of shakeup. And who gets to decide what the will of the people is, anyway? It sounds more like the will of one person. And look, I get the idea that the government should be more efficient, I do. But this doesn't feel like efficiency, it feels like a power grab. It's like, take the money away from those that need it, and then what? Who benefits? Certainly not the average working person who relies on these programs. I mean, where's the tangible benefit for the everyday citizen?
It's absolutely a power grab, Otto, and a poorly executed one at that. It's like they're using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Look, there are definitely inefficiencies in government, we all know that. But addressing them requires a careful, data-driven approach, not these sweeping, impulsive actions. These federal grants, for instance, are carefully designed, with oversight, with checks and balances. You just can't halt trillions of dollars without some serious negative ramifications, and I worry that the chaos will be impossible to come back from.
But maybe those checks and balances, Sarah, they're part of the problem. Maybe there's too much bureaucracy, too much red tape that slows everything down and prevents real progress. Maybe we need to think outside the box, to be bold, to not get bogged down by the minutiae. The state-level push to rebrand government efficiency with DOGE ideas. It's showing that there's potential here. Other states are seeing the benefits of this new way of doing things, aren't they? And isn't it worth it if we can create a system that is more agile and effective in the long term? Isn't the goal to create a better future for everyone?
Agile and effective. I'll believe it when I see it. It seems like the only people these changes are making more agile are the ones who are already in power. I'm not seeing these gains that you're talking about, Jesus, and I am seriously worried that we're going to end up with a much less functional government and that it will be much harder to hold them accountable. Look, I am for efficiency. Who isn't? But this feels more like a dismantling of our government rather than improvement. And you know what I'm worried about most. It's that the average person, they just don't have a say in all this. The little guy always gets the short end of the stick.
And I think that's a crucial point, Otto. The average person, the taxpayer, they're the ones who are going to bear the brunt of all this. The uncertainty, the disruption, this isn't some theoretical exercise. It impacts real families, real communities. And Jesus, this isn't just about cutting red tape. It's about dismantling the very structures that ensure accountability and fairness. Those career civil servants that are being fired, they're not just random people, they're subject matter experts. They're people who uphold the laws of this country. And the grant system, it might have flaws, but it's a crucial mechanism for funding vital programs, for addressing social needs. The wholesale pause is like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's reckless.
But Sarah, isn't the aim to refine the system, not simply to throw it all away? Maybe the idea is to really examine these programs, to see which ones are actually working and which ones aren't, And yes, I agree that there will be disruption in the short term, but I wonder, if we could implement a much more streamlined and efficient government system, wouldn't that ultimately be worth it? Think about it. Less wasted money, more resources available for actual innovation and for the future, not just on outdated systems. And this isn't just about money, is it? The whole point is to empower people, to get rid of this feeling that the government is this cumbersome, unresponsive bureaucracy, and to create a system where the government is actually a partner in progress. That's my vision.
A partner in progress? Right now, it feels like they're more of an obstacle. And I don't see any real transparency in this whole process. Where's the accountability? I want to see specific numbers. I want to know what programs are actually being improved and which ones are just being cut. Because when I look at the news, I see firings and investigations and pauses and memos, but where are the concrete improvements? And frankly, this DOGE branding, it's just a way to make it seem more palatable. It's all window dressing. It's like a cheap marketing trick. The average person sees through all of that. They're tired of empty promises.
It absolutely is window dressing, Otto, a brand slapped onto a deeply flawed and dangerous approach. And the lack of transparency is another major red flag. These firings at the DOJ, they aren't based on actual performance reviews. They're based on political allegiance. The fact that they're specifically targeting those who investigated the president sends a really bad message, doesn't it? It's like saying, if you hold us accountable, we'll punish you. And the grants pause, it is impacting so many programs, and they haven't said what the process is for deciding which programs get an exception. Where is the data to support this drastic action? Where are the safeguards to make sure this review is objective and fair and not politically motivated? It just feels like they're making it up as they go along.
But isn't that the nature of innovation, Sarah? Sometimes you have to be willing to break some rules, to try new things, to trust your gut instinct, to really test the limits of what's possible. I mean, look at Elon. He doesn't play by the rules. He launches rockets that some people called impossible. He builds electric cars that some said were just a pipe dream. He is pushing the boundaries, even if some people are worried about it, and so too, this administration needs to be allowed to push the limits of what's possible in government, right? And yes, maybe this isn't a perfect system, but at least they are trying something. They are trying to be bold, aren't they?
But this isn't about building rockets, Jesus. It's about people's livelihoods. It's about their families, their communities. And let's be real here. Those rockets are being built with government money in some way or another, aren't they? I'm not seeing how these changes are creating a better life for me and my neighbors. In fact, it's actually making things worse, and it feels like they are just lining their own pockets. And this isn't about being bold. It's about being reckless. And frankly, I am worried that we're going to end up with a system that's more unfair, more corrupt, and more unresponsive to the needs of the average person.
And, Otto, the comparison to Elon is really not apt here. Elon works in the private sector, accountable to his investors. Government is accountable to the people, and there are specific processes and laws that govern it. And these actions, they're not just reckless, they're setting a dangerous precedent. It's like they're saying that government can act with impunity, that they don't have to abide by any rules, that they can just do whatever they want. And that's a slippery slope, and it undermines the very foundations of our democracy. It's dangerous and unprecedented, and I fear what will happen next if they are not stopped.
But, Sarah, isn't there a way to see this as a kind of necessary evolution? Maybe this is just a very intense phase of change, but eventually, it could create a much more effective system. If we can trim the fat, eliminate the waste, streamline the processes, we could have a government that actually works for the people. And at the end of the day, isn't that what everyone wants? A leaner, more agile government that's responsive to the needs of the people. Isn't that like the holy grail of government? And the states, they are taking on this initiative with DOGE. Doesn't that mean that there's merit to it, even if the US federal version seems to have some short-term problems?
Leaner and more agile? Maybe. But at what cost? Because I'm seeing a government that's less transparent, less accountable, and more focused on serving the needs of a few rather than the many. And this whole DOGE thing, I just see that as a way to distract people, to get them excited about government in the same way as a football team, but when you look under the hood, it's all the same old problems. This whole DOGE branding at the state level, it's just more hype, more smoke and mirrors. It's just another version of that old political line, we're going to fix things. They've been saying that for decades and things just get worse.
And that's the key point, Otto, the at what cost question. Because the cost is very, very high. It is not just about money. We're talking about the rule of law, the separation of powers, the very principles that our system is built on. And yes, there is always room for improvement, but you don't achieve that through these kinds of reckless and impulsive actions. You do that by focusing on data, by analysis, and by working in a collaborative way with the different branches of government, not by ramming through executive orders and firing career civil servants who are just doing their jobs. And these changes are setting us on a really dangerous path because when we remove accountability, the whole thing just falls apart.
Okay, I get it. I understand the concerns about the disruption and the lack of transparency. I really do. And perhaps some of these actions are more heavy-handed than they need to be. But I still have this feeling, this conviction that there's something really big happening here, a real transformation in progress. Maybe this pause, these firings, they're not ideal, but maybe they are a necessary step to a better, more efficient government in the long run. Maybe they're the growing pains of a system being reborn. I mean, I am trying to have some optimism here. I have to. Because the idea that we can achieve more, that we can do better, that's still compelling to me.
Well, Jesus, optimism is a good thing. I just think you're being a little too optimistic about all of this. Because right now, things just look really messy. And I don't think that the average person, the people who rely on these programs and grants, they don't feel like things are going to get better. They just see a lot of disruption and a lot of chaos and not a whole lot of benefit. And all this DOGE stuff, I am just not sold on it, and frankly, I think the focus should be on how to make sure that people are getting what they need rather than big claims of efficiency that we can't see.
And I think that is a very valid point, Otto, because ultimately all of this is about people's lives, and we need a government that understands that, that's accountable to them, that's transparent, that respects the law. And it seems like the actions we are seeing are going in the opposite direction. And while I want to believe that things can improve, I cannot get behind a process that seeks to undermine the fundamental principles of our system. And at the moment, that is what I see happening, whether we call it DOGE or not. It's just deeply unsettling.
Well, this has certainly been a thought-provoking discussion. I guess we all see things a little differently, but it's important to have these conversations, isn't it? I'm still going to hold on to my vision of a more efficient, more responsive government. Maybe I'm an idealist, but I really believe it's possible. But it's also important to have the viewpoints of people like yourselves, who offer very valid concerns. It's a good reminder that progress isn't linear, and that it's a process of constant refinement.
Yeah, well, I'm going to keep my eye on what's happening and keep speaking up for the everyday people who are impacted by these changes. I am not against improvement, but I have real concerns with what I am seeing here. And I'll always be skeptical of grand plans and big promises, especially when it seems the people at the bottom are always the ones that suffer.
And I'll keep advocating for a government that upholds the rule of law and respects the separation of powers and follows proper procedure. Because that is what makes our system work. I don't believe that shortcuts or rash decisions is a path towards a better future. And I think it's more critical now than ever to make sure we uphold our democratic processes.
Thank you for tuning into the DOGE Diaries. Until next time.